It's long been a joke in some of the circles that I've moved in that we are the disagreeable. You know, we are the people who won't just say what we think other people want us to say.
I'm Jane.
Hello, I'm Naomi Cunningham. I'm a barrister specialising in employment and discrimination law. That's what I always used to say. These days I'm almost entirely specialising in litigation arising out of what I call the gender wars. And until very recently I was chair of Sex Matters, which I no longer am.
And I'm Bets.
And this is
Insightful Sisters.
Hello, everybody. We are so excited to have Naomi with us tonight. I've been talking to friends in this mad little world that we inhabit as sex realists, and everybody was really very, very excited. And when I messaged you beforehand, Naomi, I said I was a big fan, and I could sense this immediate slight backing off. I'm guessing that's not something you looked for or particularly comfortable with. Is that a good guess?
It's the most peculiar thing. Yes, I'm not in the kind of line of work where you expect to have fans at all. Maybe some do. There have been barristers in the past who've had a big public profile, and there are some. I never dreamt that I'd be doing the sort of work in which I would have fans, and it's a very peculiar sensation.
You mentioned briefly in your own introduction that you sort of, you made, I don't know if you made a space or you found a space and you decided this is what you were going to specialise in. What made you do that?
I was very bored, to be quite honest, with what I was doing at the time. It wasn't suiting me. I was specialising at the time in mass equal pay work. Although there is a real injustice there, it's of quite an impersonal sort. And these mass claims involve thousands of claimants, and the detail of the evidence is desperately tedious. And it's quite hard to know if you're working one of those cases, you are a little cog in an enormous machine. And it's very hard to know at any given moment whether what you're doing is actually likely to make any difference to the outcome at all. It's very hard to work out what kind of effect. There's no feedback. You don't know what you're achieving or whether you're achieving anything, or that was certainly how it seemed to me. And I'm sure others do it with much more relish than I did. But I'd got to a point where I just couldn't do it anymore. And that coincided. I mean, I don't think it was pure coincidence that coincided with the point that I was getting extremely interested in sex and gender and these issues that I'm now engaging with. And I think I was already chair of Sex Matters. And that was absorbing more and more of my time and attention. And I found I was trying to run two different kinds of work. One kind was absorbing in an enormous amount of my intellectual and emotional energy, and I was obsessing about it, and I was fascinated with it, and I was constantly talking to other people about it. I was learning from other people and kicking ideas around, and at the same time, I was doing this other sort of work that just didn't engage me in the same way at all, and I wasn't doing it justice. And I was increasingly feeling bad about my inability to give the work that I was doing professionally the attention it deserved. And it came to a point where I thought I've got to either stop being a barrister or find myself in a kind of practice where I'm properly engaged. So I took a deep breath. I think it was about 3 years ago. It was at the end of 2022, and I negotiated a withdrawal from the mass equal pay work that was dominating my practice at the time. And that all ended very amicably. It was everyone was lovely about letting me go. That burnt my diary for 2023 pretty much to the ground. I started 2023 thinking, am I going to have a practice? Is there going to be anything for me to do? And I think at that point I had one big case in this area, which was Rachel Mead and Westminster City Council and Church Social Work England, a social worker who had been subjected to disciplinary and regulatory proceedings by both her employer and her regulator for some very innocuous likes and reposts on Facebook of pretty mainstream gender critical material. And she'd been put through hell for a couple of years by both her employer and her regulator. And I had that coming up. I think it was in July that year. And there wasn't very much else in my diary at all. So it was a big gamble, but I knew that I couldn't carry on doing what I was doing. So something had to change. And then I got various other cases in this area, and it's turned out that there is a practice in this area. And this year in 2025, I've been busier than I've ever been in my life before.
I don't know if that's a good thing or not, really.
Yeah, I asked myself the same question because I have terribly mixed feelings about this. I actually carry quite a lot of survivor guilt because there are so many people who have had their lives turned inside out by this horrible toxic cult, which is what I think it is. I think it's a delusional belief system that corrupts everything it touches. And I think the people I feel for most intensely are the parents of children who've been drawn into it and who've been damaged by it. And most of all, the parents who have been bullied and emotionally blackmailed into supporting their children in harming themselves, supporting their children in medical transition. And what has been done to those children and those parents is beyond awful. It's wicked. So those are the people who've suffered worst of all, but lots of other people have suffered plenty. I mean, loads of people have lost their jobs over this, have been bullied at work, have lost friendships, have been hounded on social media, have lost freelance work. I mean, there's been an awful lot of suffering that has come out of this thing. And we shouldn't be having to have these fights at all. And the impact for me professionally has been frankly wonderful because I am doing work that I believe in to an extent that I'm not really used to.
I think we all, probably all listening, and understand that, because to a much lesser extent, there's a lot of people who are doing something that they feel they have a purpose for, that
Yeah.
they never imagined
Yeah.
that they would be here. It's an amazing thing. What we thought we'd do today is to give people a bit of perspective on 2025 and also to try and think about 2026 and what's happened in the legal world. So Bex is going to ask you about some of the wins. I'm going to sit back and listen.
Yeah. So Jane handed that over pretty well, really. I suppose looking back over 2025 now, you say that it's been one of your busiest years ever. What would you say the highlights or the wins of the year have been for you?
Well, the absolutely outstanding win for the whole movement was for Women Scotland in April. And that date, the 16th of April, I think will be forever engraved on my heart. And I can't claim that as my win. I mean, I was there when judgment was handed down. I was there not as a lawyer. I did none of the argument, but I was there as representing one of the clients, the intervener, Sex Matters. But that was, I think we knew by the end of the argument, the previous November. I say we knew. I think we were very, very hopeful because the argument did seem to have gone our way. But you can come out of court or tribunal thinking that the case has gone your way and be very disappointed indeed. So you're never completely sure. You always have your heart in your mouth when it comes to the moment that you actually get judgment. And then when we heard the judgment, it wasn't just good, it was fantastic. It was really clear, it was unequivocal. It was everything we could have wished for, I think, and more. And absolutely right, to my mind. So that's the big one. I think what we've seen since then has been the most astonishing denial and pushback.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that because almost immediately following the judgment, there was this instant pushback of, well, it's just clarifying the law. Nothing's changed and it doesn't apply in all situations. How significant of a win was it for women's rights?
I don't think we know yet. In theory, it was conclusive. To my mind, there is no doubt that that judgment means that, for example, single-sex spaces have to be single-sex. You can't use the Schedule 3 powers, for example. Schedule 3 is the bit of the Act that makes it possible for providers of services and public functions to provide single-sex and separate-sex services, or at least two paragraphs of Schedule 3. Schedule 3 does a great number of other things besides, but there are two particular paragraphs of Schedule 3 that we all focus on, 26 and 27, and to an extent 28, which allow for separate-sex and single-sex services. it is, to my mind, very clear indeed from the Supreme Court judgment in For Women Scotland that any use of those powers, those exceptions, must be on the basis of biological sex, must be on the basis of sex, in other words, real sex, actual sex, literal sex. I'm always resist the expression biological sex because sex is biological, and so it's redundant.
Mm.
So it's very clear that, for example, the long-standing myth that's been so effectively promulgated that somebody with the protected characteristic of gender reassignment has, by virtue of that protected characteristic, a right to be treated as if they were the opposite sex. I mean, that's a myth that's been put out with great determination and effectiveness by organisations like Stonewall and Gendered Intelligence for years and years and years. And For Women Scotland nails that beyond any possible doubt. The correct comparator for a man, if a man who says he's a woman is treated in a certain way that he's not happy about, and he says that's because of his protected characteristic of gender reassignment, then the comparator for him is a man who doesn't have the protected characteristic of gender reassignment. So you ask the question: would a comparator for him without the protected characteristic of gender reassignment have been treated the same? And if the answer is yes, then he hasn't suffered discrimination on grounds of gender reassignment. He suffered discrimination on grounds of something else. I mean, it may well be, it probably is sex. He's been told you can't come into this space because it's a women-only space and you're not a woman, you're a man. Now, that is undoubtedly discrimination on grounds of sex. To be lawful, it will have to find its way into one of the exceptions in the Act. But there are lots of single-sex exceptions, so it probably is lawful.
Mm.
And saying to him, no, you can't come into this space because you're a man, is not discrimination on grounds of gender reassignment, because somebody just like him in every respect, only without the protected characteristic of gender reassignment, would also have been excluded because he would also have been a man.
That's a really important distinction, isn't it? Because I think before there's been this sort of purposeful obfuscation between gender and sex as terms, where it's been presented, as we've seen, the Stonewall version of the Equality Act didn't include sex at all, did it? It was gender and gender identity only.
Yeah. And I'm sure there are still plenty of EDI policies in existence that don't correctly name the protected characteristic of sex, just proceed on the basis that everything is gender. And to an extent, people have used sex and gender interchangeably. And I think the trans activist campaigners have done quite a clever job of using that tendency to use them as synonyms to their advantage, to replace sex with gender, or to replace sex as the two biological categories with gender, meaning gender identity, without actually saying that they've made that replacement. And so much of this campaigning has been effectively done by stealth, by sort of sliding something in as, oh, everybody knows, everybody understands this, without ever actually straightforwardly saying it in terms that would make it possible to say, hang on, when did we agree to that? What is it you're saying? And a very clever job has been done, I think, of creating a false consensus by just proceeding on the assumption that all right-thinking people know this, and you're some sort of idiot or bigot if you're not signed up to this. And people who aren't sophisticated, people who don't or aren't sophisticated in these particular arguments, which includes a lot of people who are very sophisticated in many ways, have, I think, been bamboozled by that very often into thinking, maybe there's something more complicated here. Maybe there's something complicated I don't understand. Perhaps I'd better not venture in because I don't want to be thought of as a bigot. And I think that fear has been very cleverly used and employed.
I think even on a systemic level, you mentioned the extraordinary pushback against the Supreme Court ruling. There was not just from trans rights activists, but from so many organisations, we saw this sort of reluctance to put things into effect, which it seems to be shifting now. But for the longest time, it seemed that there was no fallout or no real impact following the Supreme Court ruling. I mean, what do you think happened there?
I think doing the best I can with it, and I confess it took me to a degree by surprise. I think I thought the changes would come faster and more completely as a result of the judgment. And I think what I underestimated was just how deep the capture of our institutions was, and just how bitter the opposition would be. So there have been, I mean, one of the first things I noticed in the immediate aftermath of the judgment, there was some really shockingly bad commentary on it put out by law firms of a sort that, big, reputable, serious law firms that wouldn't normally want to be seen talking nonsense about the law, would normally find it, would regard it as very important reputationally, only to put out accurate, sound, well-judged commentary on the law. And there were firms of that nature that were putting out unbelievably inaccurate, tendentious, activist commentary saying, oh, this doesn't really mean what it says, or it's all more complicated than it seems. And we can't know. And then quite quickly the narrative became, we can't be expected to make any changes until we see the revised EHRC code of practice. And that became everybody's excuse. Nothing can change until we see the revised EHRC code of practice. But the bad analysis, the bad commentary from lawyers who really ought to have been capable of knowing better is, I think, a particular case of a phenomenon that I've become more acutely conscious of over the last few months, I think, which is the really quite extraordinary distorting power of this ideology on people's ability to think. It's something that I've observed over and over again now, that people who normally can think straight, people who normally make sense, people who are normally very clever and rational and think in straight lines, when they have to think about something engaging this ideology, their brains seem to turn to glue and dribble out through their ears. It's just astonishing. I don't really understand. No, I'm going to put that more strongly. I really don't understand the mechanism for that. I don't understand how it comes about that such clever people can be made so stupid by this ideology. I don't get it. And I wonder, I almost wonder if there is something, in some ways, in human terms, a little bit defective about those of us who do retain our ability to think straight in the teeth of this force. Is there something a little bit abnormal about us? It's long been a joke in some of the circles that I've moved in that we are the disagreeable. We are the people who won't just say what we think other people want us to say. And it's astonishing to me how many otherwise clever, sensible, senior, experienced, capable people don't seem to be able to be disagreeable in this way, don't seem to be able to say, but that's nonsense. So yes, there is something socially, I don't know, anthropologically, psychologically, very, very odd going on. And I sometimes wonder if we're the odd ones and the kind of all the normal human beings who behave like our species usually does, are, yeah. I suppose what I'm saying is,
we're the right kind of antisocial, that we don't need to move with the crowd.
I suppose, and yet it is very deep in our species that you do have to move with the crowd. I mean, we are a highly social animal, and so I'm sort of humble bragging, but I'm also sort of genuine in saying that I sometimes wonder or worry that there is something a little bit wrong with those of us who don't have that intense need to go with the herd.
Well, if there is, thank goodness there is, I suppose.
I think we're necessary, even if we're quite annoying.
That should be on a banner. Necessary, if quite annoying. So the other big story this year, I suppose, has been Sandy Peggy, and it's been a partial win. I mean, all through that trial, similar to the response to the Supreme Court ruling, there was all sorts of contrasting information being thrown back and forth, not all of it really relevant to the case. And then even on the trial outcome, I saw multiple articles from different places, some saying it was a partial win, some saying it was a failure. And I mean, how do you sort of reflect on it? It's happened quite recently, obviously. How are you feeling about the response throughout the trial?
I'm going to be a bit guarded about that because it's a live case in which I'm instructed. So I don't want to comment on the merits. I don't want to say anything that's not already in the public domain, basically. So I think I'm going to limit myself to saying it is undoubtedly a partial win. I mean, Sandy Peggy won, I think, 4 aspects of her claim. And it is undoubtedly also a partial loss because there's quite a lot else in her claim that she lost, and it's in the public domain that she's going to be appealing it. And inevitably, both sides will have been spinning as suits them because that's what they always will. And I know it's disappointing. That's probably the thing that your listeners most want me to talk about, and I can't.
That's understandable. I mean, I'm glad that it's not over, so I can't be too disappointed that you can't speak too much on it. Do you think it was the timing with the Supreme Court ruling at the start of the year that sort of has made that case particularly blow up? Because we have seen tribunals before, haven't we?
Yes, and I don't think there's any reason why I shouldn't say that the extent to which it has hit the headlines has completely taken me by surprise. I could tell from the outset that it was an important case, but I didn't know it would be headline material day after day after day during the hearing and then after judgment's handed down. And for most of this year, it's been in and out of the headlines almost constantly. And that's been an extraordinary phenomenon. I don't really know why, except I suppose it's the first case in which the real practical on the ground consequences, or not, as the case may be, of the For Women Scotland judgment have been explored. So that's, I guess, part of it. But what else? Yes, I'm not the expert in what does and doesn't cause something to hit the headlines, but it's been an extraordinary phenomenon.
It really has. And I mean, I think it cuts to the heart of a lot of questions that we as a society are asking ourselves at the moment in Britain. And I won't keep pushing you on it because I understand that you're limited on what you can say. I will pass back to Jane though, because I think she's wanting to have a chat to you about changing attitudes that are maybe beginning to happen.
There've been things that suggest that we've got a bit of a sea change happening. We've recently had the change in policy of the WI and the Girl Guides. There was the Scottish National Library changing its mind and apologising about the book on the women who wouldn't wish. What do you think? What's the impact of those sorts of other decisions around the law, if you like?
And keep thinking we're going to start to see an avalanche. And it was very exciting that I think was it 2 consecutive days, or was it even on the same day that the Girl Guiding and the WI?
I think it was morning and afternoon, but I may be wrong.
It was certainly in very quick succession. And when that happened, I thought, wow, it's really starting to happen now. Organisations are starting to realise that they've got to follow the law, and that women only means women only, and for girls means for girls, not boys who say they're girls, and so on. Things like that keep happening and then sort of stalling. And I think maybe I was too optimistic. Maybe it's not all going to happen in a rush after all. And I think, one of the things that's the WI and Girl Guiding decisions they're good as far as they go, but they're troubling in the terms in which they were made. I think both organisations were very apologetic, and they made a big fuss about how they were doing this with a heavy heart, and they were extending sisterhood to these men who wanted to pretend to be women in their organisations. And male volunteers are still being accepted in adult roles in Girl Guiding, which strikes me as pretty troubling. So those feel like quite partial victories, quite foot dragging. The institutions are still captured. They haven't had a proper change of heart. They've just been told clearly by their lawyers, this is what the law is, and you can't lawfully carry on. I'd long thought that charities for women and girls, where their charitable objects were directed to benefit for women and girls, must simply be acting unlawfully, acting outside their charitable objects, if they were diverting resources to benefit men and boys. So that had seemed to me very clear for ages. So they finally got that advice, and then they grumpily and foot-draggingly announced that they were going to comply with it. But it doesn't give me confidence that they're not going to be looking for ways round and backdoor routes to include men and boys.
One of the things I found quite heartening was that 2 friends of mine posted about the WI. They reposted the statement of how sad it was, as you say, that we've that we've had to make this decision. And what heartened me was nobody commented or liked those posts when they were on Facebook, which is a much more public
Yes.
social media, isn't it? And I thought that suggests that people are more knowledgeable about this
Yeah.
than they were.
Yes. And I think, I mean, one of the things that has happened as a result of all the lawfare in this area and other things besides the political campaigning is that these questions are much more in the public consciousness. I think we are gradually educating people
Yeah.
about the real impacts of trans activism. So that's optimistic. And you can't, once people know, they can't stop knowing.
Yeah.
So I think yes, certainly personally, I have felt a real sea change. I mean, in my professional relations, a couple of years ago, I'll back up a bit on this and give you a little bit more background because to make sense of this, I've never been good at the sort of marketing events that lawyers do, where we go to parties and we're supposed to schmooze the solicitors, or barristers are supposed to schmooze the sort of solicitors who might send us work.
Yeah.
And everyone's there for a purpose. Everyone has an ulterior motive, and it's all about networking. Not an extrovert, and I'm not a natural at those sorts of events. I've never been good at working the room at a party. And I think I've always found those kinds of events easiest when they've followed some sort of speaker event where I've been speaking. And if you're speaking at an event and then there's mingling over drinks afterwards, you kind of have an excuse to be there. Everyone knows who you are. You're pre-introduced to everyone. It's much easier. You don't have to kind of justify your existence. But my default setting is that I just never much liked those things, never felt any good at them, usually got stuck in a corner drinking my orange juice much too fast and knowing what to say or not feeling I had anything very interesting to say that was worth shouting above the hubbub. So that's background. Over the last few years, I confess my disagreeableness has helped me enjoy those things more because I've been getting a bit notorious and I've got a thing that I really want to talk to people about. I want to consciousness raise about. So I've been kind of bouncing around the room. I mean, one of my games has been to find the most senior male lawyer I can and acquaint him to his bemusement with the fact that, get him to agree with me that sex is real and a real difference between human beings and one that sometimes matters. And then acquaint him to his bemusement with the notion that means that he is in fact now officially a TERF, a trans exclusionary radical feminist.
Fantastic.
This crusty old judge doesn't think that he's any sort of feminist, let alone a radical feminist.
It's turf chess.
And that's quite a fun game. So
yeah,
doing that for a bit. And my other game at parties has been to acquaint rather surprised people with the term autogynephile and get them to understand what it means. It's quite important that people know this word and what it means. And, this doesn't necessarily make me popular, but it gives me a game to play at parties. And I've quite enjoyed it, and in my disagreeable way.
Autogynephile is so strange. I mean, we all used to know the story in the paper about someone pinching washing from somebody's line. We all knew what that meant, didn't we?
And it's been sort of airbrushed out.
Yeah, what happened?
Where did all the transvestites go? We used to know that there were men who cross-dressed for erotic purposes, and they went to clubs. They dressed up as women. They went to clubs and they did their thing. And you sometimes saw a drunk gaggle of them on the tube late at night, and you thought, yeah, okay, you do you. And suddenly, that doesn't seem to be a thing anymore. And anyone who says he's a woman, he's a woman, and he's entitled to access women-only spaces. And it is an astonishing collective effort of volitional amnesia, if you like.
Yeah.
Willed amnesia. It's extraordinary.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
You mentioned about the sea change. One of the cases that I was lucky enough to go to, I think it was a hearing, and it was Lindsay Smith versus the Northumbria police. And I thought that was a really important case because it really established that the police can't march in a pride parade, which
Yeah.
sounds so basic. And one of the things that the judge asked in the case was, what would you do as the police if there was some sort of breaking of the law happening? How would you step outside of the march and start to police it? And it's such a basic question, but really important.
Yeah, yeah. And that was that was one of the big important wins of the year. I think that's a really important principle to have established, that the police need to be impartial. I mean, it shouldn't need saying, but here we are. But the sea change I was embarked on was that there've been three phases for me, really. Just basically hating those sorts of marketing parties and events, enjoying them in a rather contrarian, I've got some games to play, I can be the bad fairy at the party sort of way. And suddenly, I think it was an event early this year, in January or February this year. I went to it. I can't remember what it was now, the professional associations, and I went to it kind of braced for the usual bad fairy at the party atmosphere, and thinking that, I would corner various people who were desperate to get away from me and try to make them agree that up is up and down is down, and grass is green and the sky is blue. And it wasn't like that at all. I was in demand. People were happy to talk to me. I was, I felt like a popular person at the party. And that was lovely. It was a surprise and new. And I thought things have changed. What I believe is now respectable, and people aren't scared to be seen talking to me.
Yeah.
And that, in a way, is, to me, the most encouraging thing, that what I actually experience myself in my professional relationships, it all feels a lot warmer. It all feels a lot more respectable now. That's nice.
That's lovely to hear. You've got a few things coming up for next year. Some things you're revisiting and going back into court, but there's also the broader picture: the puberty blockers trial, the code of practice for the AHRC. What are your thoughts on what 26 is going to bring us?
I think I'm very, very bad at predicting the future. My crystal ball feels very fogged. My 2026 is going to bring a lot of appeal work. It's in the public domain that both Peggy and Kelly are going to be appealed, and also over the case about UCU's behaviour encouraging protests against the screenings of adult human female at Edinburgh University. That's out for appeal. I don't think we've got dates yet, so that may be next year. It may even be early in 2027.
Is it a good thing when things go to appeal? I mean, it certainly worked well for the Supreme Court ruling, didn't it?
Absolutely, yes. I mean, losing a case at first instance is I won't call it a mixed blessing, but it's always it's a mixed curse for sure. Because if you just win at first instance, then all you've got is a first instance judgment, and that's not case law. That's not a source of law. First instance employment tribunal judgment doesn't tell us what the law is. It just tells us what that particular tribunal thought the law was. And it doesn't have any binding effect on any subsequent tribunal. So if you get a good win at first instance, it's great in the individual case, but it doesn't change the law. It doesn't clarify the law. It doesn't make the law any more certain than it was. Whereas if you lose, I think Maya Forstater has said many times that the single most important thing she's ever done in this war is lose her case at first instance. Lose the point that finding that gender critical belief was not worthy of respect in a democratic society was, with hindsight, a really important turning point, because it went on appeal and because the appeal went the right way. So yes, it's always double-edged, and if you lose at first instance and then you go on appeal and get it corrected, then the appeal judgment is law. That is a source of law, and other tribunals will have to follow it until and unless it's overturned by a higher court. So, yeah.
So you're going to have a busy year, and we're going to be tuning in and listening or reading tribunal tweets. There's a whole sort of group of people now that have got a new hobby in. I mean, I actually listened to Sandy Peggy partly lying on a Greek beach. I managed to listen into the court ruling. My poor husband. But
I've admired the dedication of the people who've followed, either by tuning in or following tribunal tweets, because I've always said advocacy is not much of a spectator sport.
It is.
I've always thought it's quite dull. It's like watching paint dry because it's so detailed and you have to know the documents and, there's not much in the way of thrills and spills, really, I would have thought. But
No, it definitely is. And hearing your champion go into battle is fabulous. Honestly, I'm sure we'll get the same feedback when this goes out.
that's a testament to how much people care about these cases, that they are willing to put in the intellectual labour to understand enough about what's going on to follow them on tribunal tweets or by tuning in. It's awe-inspiring.
Well, it's the single most important thing of cultural change, I think, in my lifetime, and it harms women and children.
It's the oddest thing, isn't it? It's by a country mile the most peculiar thing that has happened in my lifetime.
It's
I can't think of anything
madness.
to touch it. It's just weird.
Yeah, I feel as though I'm an Elizabethan theatre goer, and all these people are Puritans telling me what I can and can't do. It's
Yeah,
just
yeah.
bizarre.
But also, but even more than that, I mean, I think being told what you can and can't think is one of the reasons it's so enraging.
Yeah,
But the thing that really puzzles me is just how many intelligent, educated people are prepared to believe that things that are plainly not true are true.
yeah,
I mean, I suppose it's slightly risky to say this, but um, I'm I'm not religious. I suppose you could say the same of religion, that there are a lot of people who believe things that are that anyone who doesn't believe in those religions would say are plainly counterfactual. But they don't. I think people can compartmentalize religion.
yeah.
Way that
Nobody drags you to church with them, do they?
Exactly. And nobody expects you to pay lip service to their religion
No.
in the workplace. Nobody expects you to bow your head at the holy name of Jesus if mentioned in the workplace, or pay any other sort of positive lip service to any ordinary religion in the workplace. And yet there is this expectation. And also these counterfactual beliefs get right into the heart of people's working lives when it comes to people like clinicians and therapists and social workers. Those people need to know that sex is real, and they need to know the sex of the people that they're dealing with, and they need to know that nobody can change sex, literally. And if they try to, they'll fail. And if they pin their hopes on it, on being able to do so, they will be disappointed. And yet they seem to be able to persuade themselves to proceed as if those things are not true. And I can't think of a parallel. I can't think of any other context in which such obviously counterfactual propositions are accepted by serious, educated professional people as if they were true. It's weird.
It's very strange. It's really strange. So, what do you think about the puberty blockers trial? Because that, I'm hoping, are we hoping that something will happen in the next few weeks to stop that going ahead?
I certainly hope so. It's astonishing to me that it could have got ethical approval. I can't claim to be properly across the legal challenge to that, or how it's framed, or how it's going to proceed, or what its prospects of success are. So I can't talk about that as a well-informed lawyer, unfortunately. But I can say that I find it jaw-dropping that um, that a trial of such obviously harmful treatments on children, uh, which I mean, they are both obviously I mean, puberty blockers are harmful. We know that because they block puberty. I mean, how obvious does it have to be? So you'd have to have, I would have thought you would have to have the most compelling evidence that they deliver really life-changing benefits as in exchange for the harms that they undoubtedly do before you'd even try them. And there is no such evidence. There's no satisfactory evidence that puberty blockers improve anything. They just do harm. So how that can be allowed to go ahead, I'm aghast. And I very much hope that either a legal challenge or a political change of heart will put a stop to it.
Yes, I think we're all hoping to that. Well, this has been marvellous. I'm going to pass across to Bex. She has our final question.
Right. Yes. So we do come to our final question, which is the same question we ask in every episode. And that is, do you have a woman of the moment?
I have so many women of the moment. I'm blessed to be working with an astonishingly able and dedicated and all-round wonderful bunch of women in a whole range of different spheres. And picking one is really tough. But I think my woman of the moment, as of today, is going to be Emma Hilton, Dr. Emma Hilton, who's been one of my heroes for about as long as I've been aware of these issues, for the wonderful wit and clarity with which she sets idiots straight on basic biology online, and for, at this particular moment, for taking over from me as chair of Sex Matters. And stepping up into a really key role in this movement at a time that I'm just not able to do it any longer. So, yeah, Emma Hilton.
What an excellent choice. Naomi, thank you so much for speaking to us. I mean, I've been sat fascinated listening to the discussion you've had with Jane. So I really appreciate it, and I'm sure Jane does too. Do you,
It's
Jane?
been just fabulous. We've wanted to do this for such a long time. And we were at the Manchester Book Festival when I think it was a friend of yours messaged and asked if you'd do it. And we both swore a little bit, didn't we? Happy swearing. Happy swearing.
Well, I was very, very, very sad not to be able to make that event. I would have loved to have been there with you.
It was fabulous. I think hopefully they'll do it next year again.
Yeah.
It was
I'll
just
get
great.
into my diary at longer notice next time.
Yeah, it was great. But this has been great. And I think you've given us some hope for 2026. We know some of the things that are coming, and we know that we've got an army on our side that includes you. And I know I'm trying not to sound too fawning, but when I listen to you in court, I know that you're doing something that so few of us involved in this could do, and you always have the right words. We're really so grateful for that.
Thank you. It's lovely of you to say. I'm not sure I wholly believe it. What I do is not rocket science, but I'm glad to be able to do it.
Well, thank you so much, and great choice in Emma Hilton. We love Emma, don't we?
We do. Yeah, big fans of Emma.
Yeah.
So fantastic. Merry Christmas. And
Merry Christmas.
Happy New Year. Happy 2026, and may all our wins be big ones.
Onwards and upwards. Lovely to see you both. Thank you for having me on. It's been an honour.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you to our listeners. We really hope that you've enjoyed this episode. And if you have, please do like, share, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff to help keep our channel growing and spread the word. Thank you.